Oh, wait. I got to take one from your vantage point.
No one can ever reach Sounds I can't read.
We drywall.
Thank you.
Just got drywall in, and
Look how they have the mayor's candidates all over there. That's
I know. Yeah, they got us out here. Now, where do you sit when you're on planning commission? Okay, because I sat here. This was my spot for transit advisory. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't discover that until like a month ago. On the planning.
All right. Y'all good?
Yeah, hanging in there. How are you?
Oh, all good. Believe me, I am ready to get through all this fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm just getting over a cold. I was out. I mean, I got a cold. You know, it's the worst timing. You know, it's just,
Mike just had that too. He had the
Yeah.
bad, like the flu and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, it couldn't be worse time for you guys. I'm glad you got over it then.
yeah. This is the best I've felt in over a week. So it's just, you know,
Good.
I guess it happens. You know,
Yeah.
we're all broken down and tired. And
That is what it is.
It's really just
Yes.
like,
No, that is exactly what it is.
yeah.
Right there. Hey, Billy. Nice to see you. Believe me, if you could do a pink suit, he probably would. So.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Put in some air conditioning.
Yeah, but no, you're right about that. Your body's done with everything.
Yeah. Everyone's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm literally broken.
Well, no, it makes me laugh because people will say, so, you know, how are you going to have time to do city council? I'm like, okay, if you've ever run a campaign, you
Yeah.
stop
No,
right
no,
there.
totally.
Yeah.
That's the. That's why it's good training.
Absolutely. Holy moly. Here, you can have this one.
Yeah, we already have pizza.
Yes.
Don't collate very well. And those no.
Oh, okay.
About half, at least half of them.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm ditching that one.
Yes, right in
All
the
right,
front.
well, we'll try to keep them to about 5.
I just heard about that one too.
Oh, that was.
The number doesn't matter. I just don't want them after a half hour because
Very.
I'm planning the time in my head, you know.
Okay,
I didn't see it actually. I just heard about it like 2 seconds ago.
okay, well, we have some
Okay.
good going.
Yeah, because I did not see that until someone told me tonight.
Oh, the post. The post.
Good evening. Good evening. If we get everybody a chance to get a seat. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you very much. Good evening. On behalf of the Petaluma Argus Courier, the Petaluma branch of the American Association of University Women, and the League of Women Voters of Sonoma County, welcome to this forum for candidates running for mayor on the left in green cards, and those running for city council on the right. That doesn't mean it's the white hats. For city council, as you know, we are blessed with riches, with this many people running for one seat, one mayor, and 3 city council members. We won't have a chance to do anything but give you a hint, a look-see, get an opportunity to put a face with a name. You have to imagine we only had 4 candidates this time 2 years ago. So we're happy to have the overflow crowd, and do apologize that we will be working at warp speed tonight. As you know, the Petaluma City Council is comprised of 6 council members and a mayor, each elected in groups. This year we have half of the positions open and the mayor. We want to start by thanking our current mayor, Dave Glass, and Councilmember Albertson for their years of service to our community. Lord knows they didn't do it for the money, so a little round of applause for them. So earlier this evening, our candidates drew for the order in which they're seated. I'm going to begin with a question and answer session, and I'll be getting questions from the audience as time goes on. I'll feed in as much as possible. This time, and I apologize for not telling you sooner, if you have a question and you want to put your email address on it, we'll compile them. We'll see that the candidates get the question. So if you don't hear yours or a variety of yours, you have an opportunity to have your question answered later. You, of course, can always contact them directly. So following the question and answer period, then the candidates will have 1 minute to wrap up with all of their thoughts and tell you why it's important to vote for them. So we're going to start, we're not going to give you open remarks. We're going to let the candidates introduce themselves with the first question. And we're going to start in this instance with the mayor, starting with Teresa Barrett on the left. What's the job of the city council and what qualities do you have that would make you an effective leader?
Thank you, Pamela, and thanks everybody. The job of the City Council is to establish the policies and the vision for our city. And that has been something that has sort of stalled out in our city. So I would like to see us go back to the future and recapture the vision that was set forward about 20 years ago when we adopted a Central Petaluma specific plan, when we adopted a river enhancement plan, bike and pedestrian plans that worked toward a walkable, mixed-use, transit-oriented city that really preserved and enhanced what we all love about Petaluma and didn't make it worse. We have not been doing that for the 12 years that I've been on this council, with the singular exception of 2 years where we had some opportunities to make some good changes. I would like to see us actually get a majority on this council that really wants to speak to our general plan and really speak for the citizens of Petaluma and bring your vision to fruition. Thank you. I don't think we're supposed to clap, and I can say that because I still had 15 seconds left. But
yeah, I apologize with this
just
crowd.
to let y'all know.
It's going to be tempting to clap. If you can hold it to the end, it will sure help us move things along. And I apologize to the fabulous timekeepers, by the way, Sheila Garvey and T-Shirt, who I neglected to tell them a minute and a half. So thank you for ending quicker. Brian Powell.
So I'd like to bring a different approach that we're all used to. I think over the years things have kind of gotten out of hand, and I think it's time to stop the building here in town and really work on developing a safe place for folks to live. The environment's getting polluted at a level that's not sustainable. Disease in children here in the community is on the rise on an everyday basis. And so really I'd like to see things stop. It might not be nice for a few years, but I think we need to stop and address some of the serious issues that are at hand and knuckle down on getting more police officers and more firemen, making the community safe. Because right now things aren't going so well.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mike Harris. I'm honored to be here tonight, so thank you for this opportunity. I was honored to serve on the Petaluma City Council for 12 years, and one of the roles of a city council member, in my estimation, and I think with I have the background of doing this, is bringing people together. Every time an issue came before the city council, I think it was always incumbent upon the individual council members to listen to the opponents, listen to the proponents of an issue. So when it came before the city council and you can shape the policy, you can actually hopefully find a middle ground on that policy. policy. And I think that's what makes an effective council member. In my role this time, I'm running for mayor, of course, and if I'm honored to become the next mayor of this town, I'll continue that policy of trying to bring people together as we move forward.
Thank you. So I'm going to repeat the question. How do you vision the job of the city council, and what qualities do you have that would make you effective at that?
Good evening. I'm Kevin McDonald, and thanks to all our sponsors here. The main role of the council is, of course, setting policy, but once policy is set, to have some metrics to measure whether your policy is effective, and to retain the city manager and see the city manager implements the council's policy agenda. So those are key points. In addition, the council is the community's connecting point with policy and with the city staff. And so the council is that ombudsman, is that advocate for the people here. And so we want to make sure that that happens, because all of the city's business is based on trust. If the people don't trust the council to get the job done right, the people don't follow. To be a leader, you need to do that. My background as a civil engineer for 33 years is ideal for this. I worked in public agencies, big projects, on time, on budget. Further, I worked in Petaluma. I led the Petaluma Youth Soccer Group, big organization here in town, a lot of activity going on. But further than that, as my 4 kids grew up, I moved into planning issues. I'd go to planning meetings and be unhappy. And as I saw everybody else was unhappy at a planning meeting or at a developer meeting, because they didn't understand, they didn't get it. The city should be doing a better job of communicating. I started a group to help the people understand what growth would be in town and how we could make that good growth the growth we were interested in. That helps me be uniquely qualified for this job.
Thank you. Mr. Conklin?
Is that better? My name is Rob Conklin. The job of the city council, in my opinion, is to be the ears and eyes for the people and be able to listen to constituents and residents to convey what they're feeling and what their vision of the city is. I've lived here my entire life. I've seen Petaluma grow. I would have to say I like some of the things that are happening, and I don't like some other things. And I'd like to bring the perspective of Petaluma working families into the to a council seat. I get probably 1 or 2 phone calls a week from friends I grew up with and working families that can no longer afford to live here. I'd like to see implement some affordable housing for, kids I grew up with and working families in Petaluma. And we can talk about, what buildings and what decorations we have in Petaluma, but my vision in the next 20 years is to still see Petaluma working families living, raising children. My family's been here for 100+ years, and my kids are here. I'd like to see them raise their children here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
So Michael Regan, so I just wanted to say the main focus of a city council is to create policy for obviously city staff to implement. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And we have to, as a city council member, you have to listen to the public, listen to the community to see, hopefully, if you can come to that middle ground and find a solution that works for everybody. So I really think that's the job of the city council. And in terms of what qualities I have, being a small business owner in town, obviously going, through budgeting, how you run a business, how businesses react in this town. I mean, that's important. Also having a young family. I think that's a perspective that we don't always see on city council, is having people that have young families, because that is a big population. So having someone that sees the city in that regard. And then also I've been involved for almost a decade, been involved in community service to better this community. And that's something that I think is very important, is that you have someone on the council that really believes in community service and believes in making the community better. It's huge. And I have been involved through my various, organizations to help this city. So really for me, that's really a quality that I have through the business, through the young family, and through the fact that, I've been involved for a long time and lived here since the early 90s and gone to school here. So I think that is definitely an important perspective that we're missing on the council right now. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott.
Hi, good evening. My name is Scott Alonso, and I'm a candidate for Petaluma City Council. And not to keep repeating ourselves, but the city council's main charge is really to craft public policy at the local level, balance the budget, and give direction to staff. And we have to do that by listening to the community, listening to our neighbors. And let's get back down to the basics. We want to make sure when your toilet flushes, we know where that goes. We want to make sure when you call a police officer, the cops come. When you need an ambulance, the ambulance comes. Those are the basic core functions we need to have maintained in the city of Petaluma. We have incredible financial challenges that we have to meet head on to ensure we can keep providing those basic services. Because if we don't, we're in a world of hurt in a few years due to our fiscal situation. So I think that's what we have to be looking for at the city council level to ensure that we can look after the people of Petaluma in those areas. I think in terms of my qualities, I have a background in public service and community service. I've worked at the state level and at the county level. I bring that regional perspective. I've served the community helping constituents in this area with state agencies when I worked for the California State Assembly. And I feel like I have my ear to the ground. We have to listen better. But ultimately, for visioning, we want to make sure people can stay here. You know, what makes Petaluma so unique? How do we maintain that? How do we provide for that? And I think right now, those are the challenges. But with my background in public service and serving the community, I'm on the vice chair of the Planning Commission. I'm on the board of directors for the Public Library Foundation. And so public service is a passion of mine, and I hope to continue on the city council.
Thank you. Delinda?
Good evening, Delinda Fisher. So nice to be here, and thank you all for participating and being here this evening. It's really an honor, and I really am grateful you're here. The role of the city council member, as is mentioned, is really to create policy and to follow through on policy. As Teresa mentioned, it's really to look at our general plan and to follow our general plan. We adopted it in 2008. It's a vision for our future. It takes us 20 years out. We're now 10 years into it. And so that is what we need to be following. That's what we should know. And those are the decisions we make. Most importantly is that we approve our budget. And I would suggest that we all need to be involved in our budgeting process. We all need to know what are our sources of revenues, what are our expenditures, what do we have, and where do we need to get more, because we rely so much on fees and taxes as our revenues. For 25 years, I worked as an urban planner. I worked for consultants, including nonprofit housing consultants. So I really understand how development happens, what's required, what the needs of the community, working with city staff, working with the politicians, working with all of the concerned areas, and getting something approved that works for everybody. I was also a business owner for 6 years. I had a small retail business. And lastly, I work in sustainability. I have a sustainability certificate from Dominican University, and everything I do is through the environmental lens. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave?
Thank you. I'm Dave King. I'm just completing my first term on the Petaluma City Council. Excuse me, and I'm a little bit sick. However, and I am seeking a second term. It's been said that the main job of the City Council is to make the public policy for the city. We also hire and oversee the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk. And we're about to, the new council will be hiring the new city manager, which will be one of the most important things that any city council will do in the next 4 years, because the city manager actually runs the city. I think I'm qualified for a number of reasons. First of all, for my service in the past 4 years. You don't have to ask me. You can ask the 4 colleagues who endorse me, as well as Mayor Glass, who also endorsed me for re-election. But I think we've accomplished an awful lot in the 4 years that I've been on City Council, both in terms of infrastructure, advanced road repair. We've increased our purple pipe for recycled water. We've done a number of things. We've just recently changed our affordable housing policy, which will hopefully create some more affordable housing in this city. On an individual basis, I've lived here for 27 years. I raised my 2 daughters here with my wife, Lynn, who's in the audience. And I have a business downtown. I'm a lawyer. And I've represented thousands of people, employees and small businesses, in civil rights and employment cases for over 3 decades. I believe I know this community, I know what makes it tick, and I believe I'm qualified for another term.
Thank you. And Dennis?
My name is Dennis Posake, and I thank you all for coming tonight. I have spent almost 30 years as a physician with Kaiser Permanente between Santa Rosa, San Rafael, and Petaluma, and I believe this speaks to my qualifications. I spent much of this time engaging in difficult conversations with patients and considering the best solutions to difficult and complex problems. I certainly don't take issue with most of the other aspects of the job of City Council that the other candidates have mentioned. I'd like to just mention one additional one, which is I think the council occasionally uses what has been called the bully pulpit, and I'd like to think that that could be done more often in situations, especially where we're taking issue with things that our federal government is doing, that the council could speak up on behalf of the people when the bulk of our population feels strongly about something. Beyond that, I'm running to represent people that are chronically underrepresented. And I would like to challenge myself and the rest of the council to ensure that everyone who faces the council is treated equally and with respect.
Thank you so much. So this time we're going to start with Brian. Brian, this question is, the Petaluma Police Department has indicated that they are understaffed and need new equipment and facility upgrades. What are your plans to address those kinds of shortfalls?
I think with all the things that the community needs at the moment, we're going to probably have to add a tax bill to the scheme of things to get more money. I know that we're shy roughly 15 or so police officers and 16 firemen, including missing an ambulance. So, I mean, the money has to come from somewhere, and we're going to have to, I honestly don't know at this day how to get all the money that we need, and it's going to be an interesting feat to make that happen with the roads, with the freeway, the overpass, and our public safety officers being so overworked. So all I can say is, at this point, is to add a tax.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
Thank you. So, yeah, it was an interesting analysis that Chief Savano sent out a few weeks ago, and I saw it on Nextdoor, actually. And based on cities in our population, we should have approximately 1.7 officers per 1,000. The national average, I think, is 1.4 officers per 1,000. Our general plan actually calls for 1.3 officers per 1,000. We're currently at 1.06, and that math equates to being short 15 officers on where we should be. So it's a huge problem. There's a lot of number one priorities in the community. Obviously, whoever the new full council is, we'll have a full discussion in February when our goal-setting session happens. And then in the May-June timeline is when we discuss our first budget collectively as the new council. And at that time, you need to set the priorities and have that discussion and see what monies are available to actually fill that gap. And after that analysis and discussion is done, we need to have potentially another discussion of if we need another revenue measure as well. So we may need that in the future.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, the chief did put out a very good update on the department, and I think everybody recognizes that local safety is a key function. Not only are we behind, but they're losing officers, and they're losing officers because of competitive pay issues. I mean, we're in a situation now that's not of today's making. It's a build-up over a period. We should have seen it coming, and we should have more things in trying to resolve it, such as the fire stations are all in need of structural repair. None of them are seismically safe. That's a thing you don't just put off to the future. So, you know, we'd like to get the council on the same page. I'd like to be a team player with the council, that the agenda is we solve these problems and don't let them carry on. Can't let problems carry on. Got to solve some problems today. We need to invest in not just police and fire, but every aspect of the community that's been so battered over the last 10 years. Our budget's been cut from $185 million down to $170. We need to change that.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin.
Okay. Yes, we are down about 15 positions in the police department. We are going to have to look into maybe a public safety tax or something along that line. I've also kicked around the idea with a few people of mine who were talking about maybe a beverage tax on, like 10 cents a pint for breweries and wineries that are popping up in downtown and other areas. That might be not a very favorable thing for some people, but speaking with the Police Officers Association and Firefighters Association, they have to basically clean up the mess whether it comes to DUIs or accidents, which are a direct result with our wet town. I mean, Petaluma has always been a town that likes their beverages, but the police and fire are the ones taking the strain on that. Maybe also, since we are focusing on tourism right now, maybe we can up the hotel tax to pay for some of the extra guests in Petaluma and have, them kick some money down for our police and fire. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan.
Yeah, so, this is one of those huge problems. And I first want to say thank you so much to our police department. They do an amazing job. And with the staff we have, they do an absolute amazing job. So I think that needs to be said. Thank you. And, of course, to our fire. Not every problem can be solved by throwing money at it. What we need to do is we need to see what is truly the problem. Is it our hiring practices? Is it our recruiting? What exactly is the structural problem? If it is money, then that's one conversation we can have, but we actually need to have the conversation about what is the true issue that we're dealing with. It may be money, it may not be, but let's look at everything on the table, and once we find the problem, then let's come up with a solution, because sometimes I always hear of, let's just throw money at it, which may be the way we have to go, but why don't we have the conversation first? Let's find the problem, and then let's come up with a solution to that problem. So that's just one way I'd like to see is, and we also have to prioritize. Police and fire have not been prioritized like they should have been for a decade, and that's how we've gotten to this point. So we absolutely, in our budget discussions, we need to prioritize police and fire, and in our budget, we absolutely have to show them priority. So that's my first step into solving this problem, and it needs to be solved.
Thank you, Mr. Alonso.
Yes, thank you. I'm a public employee myself. I work in Contra Costa County. I understand the challenges that our public employees face every day. And the police department is facing tremendous salary shortages. So what happens in our town is that new recruits come here, they get off probation after 18 months, and they leave. They get hired in another department once they have their post-certification from the state. And so we can't keep people here. The challenges with that is as police officers get older, there's medical needs and they have to retire, either forced or they decide to retire. Who is our backup? Who do we call? We have a shortage. We have to work to fix that. The challenge right now with our budget is we've cut so much over the years. We've outsourced whole city departments. We haven't been able to keep up with spending on our basic needs. And so we do need to look at a specific revenue measure. Because it becomes a morale issue in the department, in our police department. If we're not compensating folks adequately, it actually hurts just the morale in the department, and that's not good for anybody.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Thank you. Well, this is certainly an ongoing issue in our police department, and being understaffed and being able to serve our community the way they need to. And their issues are becoming more complex as we as a society becomes more complex. It used to be the police had simple problems. That's not true anymore today. And I think if we could train them in a way that helps them solve today's issues and work with other agencies and lean on others to help us so that we all understand the complex issues that they're facing and how they can afford to actually perform their services. But again, it's part of this larger picture. We have a very slim budget. And what are we going to do in terms of fees and revenues in order to bring in more money to this city to be able to pay for these services? We've got streets that aren't being repaired. We've got all sorts of things that aren't being done because we don't have enough funding. And so let's talk about what actually those sources are going to be and how are we going to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Yes, well, the problem is largely money. And when I say largely, I mean 95%. We're losing police officers to other jurisdictions because they pay better, and in some cases they have better benefits. We're losing money by training officers and letting them out the door too soon because of those reasons. But it goes beyond a lack of numbers. Our facilities need vast improvement. Our fire station downtown needs to be replaced. It has needed to be replaced for at least 15 years. We're going to need to have a public safety tax or a broader general tax at some point in the next 2 years. We have a serious financial crisis in this city. The council's been briefed on it regularly for the last couple of years. Our pension liabilities are going up. Our costs are going up. We barely have a parks budget. We don't have a planning department. And we have to speak truth to the people in the city that we are the last in government. Federal, state, county, school district, city. We get the scraps, and we need to decide how we're going to go forward, and that's one way to go forward.
Mr. Posake?
I've been talking a lot about the health of the city in this campaign, and I believe that the public safety departments are critical to the health of our city. That being said, I agree with someone earlier who stated that we need to put everything on the table here. I believe that, I guess I agree with Councilmember King that the problem here is not an expenditure problem, it's a revenue problem. We need more revenue. This can be done in a wide variety of ways, some of which have been mentioned: increasing the temporary occupancy tax, increasing sales tax, increasing a parcel tax or a bond issue. And I think there are other areas that also need help in these ways, particularly our general budget in addition to the police and fire, as well as affordable housing.
Thank you. Teresa?
Thank you. Well, I can say that I agree very much with Councilmember King that this is a problem about money. And I will say that I have worked very hard over the 8 to 12 years that I have been on this council to turn over every possible way of raising money through taxes that tax others before I come to the voters of Petaluma and ask you to pay. Because I don't think we have done a very good job about that. We made a compromise with the hotel industry on the hotel tax, so we will get about $250,000. We probably could have gotten a lot more than that, but that was not to happen because we didn't have the votes on our council to fight for the rights of our city. I see I have 15 seconds left, but I'm going to tell you we need to find a balanced and fair solution that is of a limited time with a very specific need that fills the needs that protect our community.
Thank you. We're going to start this question with Mr. Harris. So the audience wonders what kind of housing, what type of housing do you want to see moving forward, and where should it go? And take a whopping half a minute.
Well,
what type and where?
What type? So, obviously, it's a huge issue. Affordable housing is a huge issue in the community. I have many friends that have to leave the area. I think we should try to reimagine potentially commercial, industrial, underutilized areas. Obviously, in the station area plan, that would be a great place to have affordable housing as well. Is that the card up already? Okay.
You could talk a little bit more. You had 15 seconds.
Oh, is that what the card was? Excuse me. So, yes. So, that's obviously, it continues to be a huge issue. So, thank you.
Sure. Sorry about that. Okay. Mr. McDonald. What and where? Housing.
What and where? Well,
Button? Yeah.
the first thing is all new housing should be transit-oriented, which is why you see the Baywood apartments near the freeway, where you see Marina near, because we're not building any more sprawl. The edge of town stuff is all gone. Sprawl is gone. What we need to do is build in the downtown core, and there's no better transit than SMART. My group, the Know Before You Grow group, pulled in a developer, one of the downtown developers, and said, what do you visualize for your apartments? He said, rentals. And we said, you have no other vision, not senior, not youth, not nothing? He said, no, the vision has to come from the city. It has to be smaller, not luxury, and downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin.
I would like to see some mixed use downtown, so that footprint is generating revenue all the time. I'd like to put a huge focus on senior housing. I have a lot of older friends who are giving me 15 seconds, who basically said they would like to downscale, but there's no place for them to go, and that would open up housing without having to build so much. So.
Mr. Reagan?
Yeah, so housing is obviously a huge issue, and we need to build more housing for young families, seniors, and working people. I mean, that's really simple. So where do we put it? I mean, our urban growth boundary has basically changed the rules of the game. It says we need to do infill, so we need to do infill. So the station area specific plan is a wonderful area to put that infill that's near. You can bike, walk, smart train, everything. That would be a great development. Now, what do we need? We have quite a few rentals. We could always use more, but we also need condos and townhouses. So again, if someone wants to downsize or a young family is able to buy a condo and actually afford that. So we need market rate or market housing, and we need rental housing. So we need a mix of it all, not just one.
Mr. Alonzo?
I am a renter, so I understand the challenges that's happening right now. We need an above all strategy. We need rental units. We need for sale units. There aren't enough options for people. Our vacancy rate in Petaluma is basically non-existent. We don't have enough options for people. And that's putting tremendous strain on working families and folks like myself that are trying to make ends meet to stay in Petaluma because we want to be here. We need to build in our core. We need to build near both of our smart stations. And as a member of the Planning Commission, I've voted in strong favor of projects that are at infill sites.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
I have this vision for Petaluma, and it's taking our historic downtown core, which is mixed use, retail on the front, on the street, walkable, with housing and workspaces above. And I want to see us expand that downtown core up our boulevards so that we can get to the train station by walking. So it provides housing for people entering the workforce and exiting the workforce. Smaller units, up to 5 stories, set back from the street after 2 stories, so it still is lovely and walkable, and you can get light down onto the street front. That is my vision for how this city should be growing.
Mr. King?
Yes. Well, in terms of type of housing that would be desired, smaller, more dense, something that is small enough that the first-time buyer can get in, and small enough that the older citizen in the community can maybe sell their home and downsize, which we are lacking. In terms of location, preferably near transit. The likely next place for development will be near the downtown station, and hopefully near the Corona station, which we hopefully, the entire city council hopes to be built. With the remaining 5 seconds, I'll handle world peace and cancer.
Mr. Posake?
While we're sitting here talking, people are moving out of Petaluma. Families are moving out of Petaluma. Everyone says this is a crisis, but nothing's getting done. My second, in light of that, my goal simply is that to fix a problem with our society when there's a situation where 2 people working full-time for the minimum wage can't find a roof. And as everyone else has said, I want to build higher, smaller, denser near transit.
Ms. Barrett?
Thank you. Petalumans desperately want the kind of housing that developers desperately do not want to build. We have got to work together with our governor and make transit-oriented development, give us the incentives, give the developers the incentives that will make that happen. As the chair of the much talked about station area plan, which was wonderful and has not yet been implemented, I was the chair, and I showed the leadership that we need, and I want to continue to show that leadership because that's what we need in Petaluma.
Mr. Powell?
This is actually one of the least of my concerns. I don't see a fix. If we look at Petaluma as a fishbowl, and there's supposed to be 4 fish in it, and at this current moment, the infrastructure's overused. We're at 70 fish in it. If I add another 120 fish to it, it's not going to fix the problem. The problem here is we have too many folks in the demographic that can sustain this many people. We need to stop what we've been doing. There's quite a few projects already underway right now, and after those are finished, Corona, Lakeville, things aren't going to be going so well.
Thank you very much. we're going to shift a little bit. We were talking about those retired people. So as we know, after 10 years, our city manager, John Brown, is going to be one of those retired people at the end of November. So what are the top 3 qualities you want in our next city manager? And we're going to start with Mr. McDonald. Top 3 qualities in our next city manager.
Well, they have to be Superman to start with, okay? Or Superwoman, right? But the main thing is they have to be a person of vision, a person who can see where the future is, a person of leadership who can pull city council concepts together so that we're not fractured, so that the goals of the council get implemented. That's number 2. And the third one, and it has to be someone of experience, someone experienced in community building. So we want somebody who can work the issues the stresses we all recognize, the financial stresses, then have to have those 3 elements of vision, leadership, and experience.
Thank you. Mr. Conklin, your thoughts?
Petaluma has its own set of problems, I would have to say, or quirks. I would like to see somebody who is local and understands the area and how Petaluma residents, they're very finicky about their city. I'd like to see somebody local. If that's not feasible, somebody that has been a manager from a city of comparable size. And I would have to say the third quality would be a hard worker and somebody who would like to go through and dive right into that budget and maybe reorganize it and see where we can pull money from and just get to work. So,
thank you, Mr. Reagan.
Yeah, so the top 3 qualities I want to see in a new city manager. Number 1, someone who prioritizes police and fire. I mean, that understands that and working with our police and fire department. So that's critical. Number 2 is someone who's dealt with pension, right? That's a huge issue coming with the city. Someone who has worked at a city where they've had pension issues, which almost every city does, and really moved that city incrementally forward. No one's really solved the problem, but someone who's incrementally moved that city forward to put them in a better position. I think it would be huge having that experience. And then the other thing is, it's huge. Number 3 is a team player. We have a lot of infighting you hear about sometimes in the publicly. We need someone who's truly a team player and wants to bring this city together, but you have to have that attitude that it's important to do that. So those are the 3 qualities that I would love to see in our new city manager.
Mr. Alonso?
Thank you. I think the first thing we have to look for in any city manager is their ability to listen to the community, engage with the community, and be a voice for residents, not just at the city council level, but on the day-to-day, because they're our top employee, they're our top manager. So we need someone that can get out of the office, meet folks where they're at, help them understand what local government is. And that's really, really important, because while we all want to listen to you up here, our city manager needs to listen to you too. We need someone with a lot of civic budget experience. Like we've been talking about, our budget is not in a great situation. We need someone who understands those numbers, who has that experience. And I think lastly, we need a city manager who's dealt with a diverse group of public employees. We have over about 300 employees in Petaluma. We've had some labor strife in the past with certain unions. And so I think we need a city manager who has that experience, who can work with not only the council, but also those labor unions, because we want to make sure we have cohesion and that our morale is in tip-top shape.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
I think, first of all, I'd like to see a city manager that represents the reflection of what our community looks like. That should be the first and foremost. Second of all, as mentioned, I think somebody who does provide great leadership, somebody who really understands how to do that and understands what the vision of Petaluma is, so that that person can actually move our vision forward. And most importantly, I think it's somebody who can change the culture of City Hall. Somebody who can create a culture of a can-do attitude and to get things done.
Thank you. Mr. King?
Yes, first and foremost, I want someone who's got comparable experience in the state of California as an assistant city manager or manager of a city of comparable size. California finance and law is unique, and we get a lot of money through grants and other programs that the state of California runs, and it's no job for someone from out of state or is a rookie. The second is someone who's going to do some significant community outreach. in the early part of their time as a city manager to find out what makes Petaluma tick. It's important for them to reach out to all the organizations and people in the city to get an idea of what makes Petaluma such a special, fun, and unique place to be. And the third thing, and it's going to be hard to tell in an interview, is someone who's patient, because they report to 7 elected officials, and that's no day at the beach a lot of the time. And it's going to be somebody who can not only interact with those individuals and their unique approaches and personalities, but has the patience to deal with all of us. So those are 3 of the qualities I think are important.
Dennis, 3 qualities in our new city manager.
I'd like to find a new city manager with a proven ability to suggest creative and effective policy changes. That'd be my first item. Certainly, if he comes from or she comes from outside of the area, they'll need to make special efforts to get to know our city. Beyond that, I would like to see, because so many of our problems relate to revenue, I'd like to find a city manager who will agree to suggest a new income stream or revenue stream for the city every month until the council is able to agree on something to increase our revenues.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barrett.
Petaluma is a full-service city. We have an airport. We have a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment center. We have 1 and hopefully soon 2 train stations. We have a transit center, a junior college, a bustling historic downtown, and we need somebody who is going to be able to hit the ground running. We need someone with a strong fiscal sense. That is critical. That is the number 1 characteristic this person must have, and he or she must be an excellent communicator with transit-oriented development experience. This is the only way we are going to be able to solve what is going on in this town in a way that respects who we are and where we want to go into the future in a sustainable way.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
I'd like to see someone that knows the difference between right and wrong and always is looking out for the community. Someone that's born and raised here in Petaluma, and someone that has experience managing a city, a successful city.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you. So I was on the city council back in 2008 or so when we actually brought on John Brown. So it was an interesting process. You learned a lot. So I think I have the background to be part of this process again. The 3 top qualities that I would be looking for is, obviously, 1 is economic development, because when we brought at the time, the new city manager, John Brown, we said, welcome to Petaluma, now do austerity policy. And now we're at that point where the new city manager, we'd like to say, please bring an economic development background, working with Ingrid Alverde, our economic development manager, and bring economic development to town. So that's one of the top qualities. Number 2 is just a budgetary background, understands budgets, because obviously our budgets are very unique. They're very lean, but they're very unique. And then I'd say, lastly, just being visible out in the community. Get out and about, learn about Petaluma, go to the Rotaries, go to the road show, talk about Petaluma. I know our current city manager does do the chamber event once a year, and that's great. Hopefully the next city manager here, whoever he or she may be, is out in the community a lot more.
All right, now we're going to go back to the lightning round, sort of. These are half-minute answers. Yeah, I know. Be thinking hard. The audience wants to know the Sonoma Marin Fair's lease is coming up. We all know that will happen in just 5 years. So what's your recommendation for the space, Mr. Conklin? Yes, in 30 seconds.
Well, any kid that grew up in Petaluma, the fairgrounds is our central park. Some people don't like the racetrack, but any kid who grew up here hears the cars fire off and they realize it's Saturday night in summer. We do need to make it so it generates revenue year-round. I'd like to see us reorganize some of the older buildings and renovate it. Maybe have like a Spreckle Center-esque thing with maybe City Hall, fire and police services also available in the center of our town.
Mr. Reagan?
Okay. So I'm absolutely in favor of keeping the fair. That's it's a homage to our agricultural history. It's who we are. So we have to keep the fair, to me. But there are a couple things that I'd like to see changed on there. One is I'd love to see the police station move there. We are in a morgue right now. It'd be great if we could have a new police station. The other thing is possibly moving City Hall and our city services down there would be a great use of land. We could sell off the police station and this space. You could absolutely do infill development that would make sense. And, if we have enough money, obviously, to do the convention center, that would be great in an emergency. We'd have an inside place where people could go in emergency. Also, the fair could use, and we could obviously use that for economic development. So I'd love to see that at the fair.
Mr. Alonso.
Well, I think the first thing we do is we need more public input. We need to listen to the community and understand what's possible at that site and engage folks in a public way. It shouldn't just be done behind closed doors all the time here at City Hall. But ultimately, I think we need to look at multiple uses, either a hotel there, or we should have some housing. The fair should certainly remain there, but in a much smaller capacity. And the fair needs to come to the table, too, with the city. It can't just be the city leading the way. We want to be collaborative, but they have to come to the table. We have to look at some sort of revenue sharing agreement potentially in the future on how the city can gain some of that revenue back.
Ms. Fisher?
We have history in the city of creating great specific plans, and I think that we should ask the Fair Board and the City Council to both appoint 9 persons each and have an 18-member committee and work for the next 3 years and actually do some planning for that site, have all of the entities that are involved in what is there and what wants to be there, and have us come and have a community discussion and create a plan for that area. And also, I personally, as well, would like to see all of our city services be provided there. It's the most central location we have in this city, and everyone can get to it, and I think that's where our services should be.
Thank you. Mr. King?
Yes, I see the fair existing at that location on a much smaller footprint. There has to be a negotiation with the Fair Board along those lines. Excuse me, along those lines. And with the remainder, I believe that the council will have some ideas, but basically it's going to have to be a public process. There'll be substantial acreage being returned to the city, and the public needs to be involved. My personal view is that I would like to see something that generates some income for the city on an ongoing basis and also serves as a central meeting place for the public.
Mr. Bosakay?
Don't have much to add to that. I agree that the city needs to get more than $1 per year from that land. Beyond that, I don't have a specific agenda for what goes there. I agree that the city, many aspects of the city, should be involved in deciding what goes there. I've already made clear my push for affordable housing, and I think that deserves a seat at the table as well. And I think that there's issues to be considered with the history of the Speedway in the sense that we have lots all around, scattered around the city that can't be developed because of leaking underground tanks, and that'll be seen there as well.
Thank you. Ms. Barrett?
Thank you. I love the fair, and I think that the fair is an important part of Petaluma, and it should be preserved. In 2008, when we were adopting our general plan, I was one of the people who insisted we lock in 20 acres of that site to be open space and parkland, because that guarantees that the fair can stay there. Having said that, we need more revenue from the site. We need more control over the site. We need more access to the site. It is the city's largest single asset, and that needs to be recognized. Thank you.
Mr. Powell?
The fairgrounds is here to stay. Because of unchecked growth in the surrounding area, I don't feel like that's a necessary place to have any more expansion. Unfortunately, what we've done over the years has caused it to be not as usable as it should be. So at this point, we're going to have to keep it the way it is and figure out a way to make things work with it.
Thank you. And Mr. Harris?
Yes, as a nod to our heritage, we do need to keep the fair there in some capacity, and I agree with that. But we need to reimagine the property. It's going to be a huge public discussion, not something we can do in 30 seconds, but a huge public discussion over numerous years. I do envision a convention center to be there that the fair could use during the fair, but then the city could use the remaining time during the year to draw events to town and be part of our economic development model. But it's going to be a huge discussion that we're going to have.
And Mr. McDonald?
Yes, the fairgrounds is a huge asset with no economic return to the city at this time. However, it has a huge cultural benefit to the city. I would never vote against the fair, but it has to pay its fair share. The real issue is what the city is doing to communicate with citizens about its being in control of its city future. The city needs to show that it has a plan, that it's engaging. If the lease runs out in a couple years and there's nothing in place ahead of time, if there's no citizen activity, then we have a problem. We'll start slow. I was at workshops, public workshops, that filled for city lack of workshops that discussed this. We need to continue that.
Thank you. Well, you've guessed it, Mr. Conklin. You're next up. In half a minute. No, in half a minute, tell me. You say, I know you feel you were there. Do you see he did? We're on a new question. I'm sorry. The audience wants to know if you see any flexibility in the budget that we've heard is slim to assist with some with some organizations that assist with affordability, such as COTS, Petaluma Ecumenical Properties, and Petaluma People Services Center, our favorite acronyms.
Those organizations are critical to our city. When the new city manager is hired, I've said before that we're going to have to go through the whole budget all over again and hopefully let the city council members have some say in reorganizing the budget, because I believe how it is now is we get handed the budget and it's kind of yes or no. I think we should be able to kind of reorganize some of that as a group and see where we can cut and where we can you know, move money around. So.
Thank you, and I see your point. You started the last question. My apologies, Mr. Reagan. Pretend it was your idea first.
Okay. Well, first, you know, PEP housing, Petaluma Ecumenical Properties, COTS are all critical. And I do want to say one thing. Petaluma People Services, and Elise is here, is absolutely critical to our community. I mean, that is serving the underserved. So we have to have that in our budget. I mean, we have a homeless problem. We all see it. We all know it. So we have to fund that. We have to make sure that's in our budget, and that is important. So, again, all those organizations are critical because they help those who are underserved and need our help. So that's, to me, a community is how you treat everybody in your community, and that's something that needs to be done. We need to look out for those who need it.
Thank you. Mr. Alonso?
I think these groups are doing a fantastic job, but the reality is they're at the front lines. You know, we have to support them. We can't keep kicking the can down the road and pretend the problem doesn't exist. We have homeless folks in town. We have folks that are struggling. We have folks that are trying to make ends meet. And these groups, like Petaluma People Services Center, are providing much needed city and county services. So we have to partner with the county. We have to look at ways locally that we can support them on things like mental health services. We also need to talk about how, you know, we can help support tenants, because a lot of that work is done with tenants' rights as well. So these are things that we need to keep pushing at the local level.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
I'd like to echo the sentiments. They're obviously critical organizations for our community. Apparently we have over 274 actually nonprofits in this community, so there's lots of people doing fabulous things. And it's required because we have a city are not doing them. And it's estimated we have over 3,000 homeless in Sonoma County, it's mentioned, and 400 or 500 of those live in our community, and I think we need to be able to provide services for them somehow. They also need mental services, childcare services, and others. Thank you.
Mr. King?
Yes. City Council, over the years I've been on, has supported COTS by funding this current fiscal year $100,000, and prior years $150,000 from our housing fund, which also means that when money is removed from our housing fund, we have less money for affordable and workforce housing. In addition, we have supported the PEP project down on Petaluma Boulevard South for seniors. It's about a 55-unit building with apartments. And I served 6 years on the board of PPSC, where I support them as a city council member whenever I can. I think it's the best organization and nonprofit in town, being biased, but We do have to do that, but we do have to look at where we're getting the money, and it's our housing fund, so we have to balance that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Brosakay?
It's an emotional issue for me. My kids went to the Boys and Girls Clubs in town, and I've served as board chair and mentor at Mentor Me, and I've helped some refugees in town with PPSC and COTS. These are all important groups, but I don't think any of us can say for sure that these groups are going to be able to get the same level of support. I would just like to point out once again, I hate to be a broken record, but that anything we can do for affordable housing will take some of the strain off these groups as well.
Thank you. Ms. Barrett?
Thank you. Homelessness is a social justice issue, and it is a statewide issue. There is not a local solution to this problem. We need to act with partnerships at the state level and our federal partnerships. We had a wonderful senior housing program through PEP, and we find that people are on the list from every state in the union, and the list is now 4 years long. If we build it, people will come and use it, and that's a good thing, but we can't build our way out of this. We need to settle this with partnerships larger than us so that we're all on the same page.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
I think this issue is mainly mental health. And so I think if we can focus on getting folks help, we can relieve the pressure off the police department, the fire department, and the housing issue. It starts from folks having problems, and if we can get them help at the beginning where it's not too late, before they're on the streets and on drugs, then we put ourselves in a better position, and it saves us money with the fire department and the police department.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
Thank you. All three of the groups that were mentioned are incredible organizations. I know all three organizations. They have great leadership. I'm sure everybody in this room knows about all three of the organizations because we're just blessed in Petaluma to have some incredible nonprofits, including those three. So as a council goal and through the budgetary process, we need to help fund these groups as much as we can because, as mentioned before, these groups are on the front line of dealing with the issues in town, and we need to continue to fund those because usually these are the types of groups that are the first to get their funding cut. So we need to be there for them to help bridge that gap.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
You asked this question in a two-part thing. One, support for the groups, and two, find the money in the budget. And I think we're all in concurrence that we are just blessed with just the best nonprofits and even affordable house builders. We need to do more of that. But the real key is, where's the revenue? Where do you find the money? We agree on the rest of it. Let's find the money. The city council's had in its goals for the last several years to improve revenue because it realizes that these are the first services that get cut. We need to find that revenue. The public needs to hear that we are broke and services are suffering, be they police service or all our other civic improvement services. We need to find that revenue.
Thank you. All right. Now let's see. Do I give Mr. Reagan his true first try? What would a forum be without discussion of traffic issues? So give me a 30-second thought on traffic. It's familiar. Everybody's thought of it before.
No, this is awesome. Get to solve a problem in 30 seconds. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so it's a three-pronged approach. Number one, we have to push, obviously, vote no on Prop 6. We got to push for 101 to get widened because obviously a lot of people go off the streets on the city streets because 101 is a bottleneck. It's a mess. So 101 push for 101 to get widened. Number two is we have to push for Rainier, crosstown connector. I believe that we need a crosstown connector. And Rainier, to me, is one of those things we can make right because we can make it walkable, bikeable, and a safe way for people to cross, plus a public safety because it goes directly to the hospital. So for me, it makes sense all across the board. Then the third thing is we have to push for that East Side Smart Station because that's going to be a commuter station that's going to help a lot of families, students be able to commute to work and take cars off the road. So those are the three things.
Wow, take a breath. Mr.
Give me 30 seconds.
Mr. Alonso, you're up.
I don't know if I can talk that fast, but I'll try really hard. So I think the first and foremost, we need to change our culture that's a car culture. We have to support pedestrian, bicycle improvements, public transit. That's a huge global problem, but that's a challenge for us too. We can't just ignore it, right? We have to fight climate change, our most pressing issue of our time. We have to support more local options for folks to get out of their cars. and it was mentioned earlier, transit-oriented development. I voted for multiple projects on the Planning Commission supporting transit-oriented development. We have to be able to give folks options to make it easy to get out of their cars and take transit to work or to go shopping.
Ms. Fisher?
Well, I'd like to suggest that the commercial projects that we've been building, the shopping centers, the traffic for those centers has to be mitigated, and it's being mitigated by Rainier. And I would suggest that all of our future building needs to have traffic that doesn't need to be mitigated. That means projects that don't create additional traffic. And I absolutely agree with Mr. Alonso that we need to provide alternatives, transit alternatives, bicycling alternatives, more walkable streets. We need to get people out of cars and less reliant on fossil fuels. That's our future.
Mr. King?
City of Petaluma, or the region, is going to receive $85 million to widen the freeway through Petaluma if the current gas tax stays in place. So I urge anybody who cares about traffic congestion in the city to vote no on Prop 6. In addition, it provides over $1 million of revenue to the city's road funds. We also need to build another crosstown connector. We've taken a few steps to build Rainier, approving the environmental impact report among them, but we need to have more roads across town to do that. However, the problem that we have with Rainier is we need to find another funding source because we have just enough to get started, but not enough to finish.
Mr. Posake?
I support the Rainier connector, but by my calculations, it's going to be a minimum of 7 years for it to be finished. We need relief from traffic a lot sooner than that as now. One thing that hasn't been mentioned enough for my taste is the transit system. I think we can do a lot to improve and market our public transit bus system, as well as get people on bikes and more safely on their bikes by improving our bike paths and trails.
Thank you. Ms. Barrett?
Our traffic problems are a direct outgrowth of the kind of development that the majority on our council has been approving for the last 12 to 18 years. And that is, it is only been constrained by the urban growth boundary, which won't allow them to go sprawl. But they are not and have not built the kind of housing that is walkable, that is mixed use, that takes advantage of our existing infrastructure and does not force everybody into their car. This is wrong and it is not sustainable, and we have had no funding reality associated with Rainier. So that is not a true mitigation, and we need to make it such.
Mr. Powell?
Because we have an issue with money at the current time, I believe we need to start with the signals. I believe we need to fix the loops in the ground. We need to fix the synchronicity on the major roads, and we also need to turn the cameras on. Many of the cameras that are installed are not working right now. I believe if we can manage to get traffic flowing, then we can better understand what type of a traffic issue we have. It's relatively cheap to do this approach, and I believe we can save some money by outsourcing it. Other companies have the proper equipment.
Mr. Harris?
Thank you. I'll echo the sentiments about Proposition 6. It's important that repeal does not pass because the $85 million would be in jeopardy for the widening of 101. And Rainier, which is an important component for the traffic fix in town, is contingent on 101 being widened. So it's very imperative that Prop 6 does not pass. With that said, we have a lot of momentum behind Rainier in terms of the EIR, the final EIR being passed, the land set aside next to the dog park, next to Freedman's when the entitlements were approved. We have the land there, and we have some of the traffic mitigation fees for that first phase.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Well, I think all the candidates got a little bit of everything right here, and it's going to be tough in 30 seconds to be too different, but Prop 6, yes, keep that bit. That's what brings us to freeway. Rainier, the city's already put $7 million in recently. You can't walk away at this point without finding out if you can solve it or not. Then we need other transportation. Be that change you want to see. Be on your foot. Be on your bike. Take the alternative yourself. Take power yourself to do that. Measure M at the county is parks this time. Vote for the parks bill. When that first $700,000 comes to Petaluma, as chair of the Park and Rec Commission, I'm suggesting that go to improving Lynch Creek, our east-west bike pedestrian corridor.
Mr. Conklin?
No on 6. And we need to make Rainier happen. direct route to the hospital. That's my #1 concern. And let's not just say we're for Rainier. Let's turn every stone. I mean, if council members and other citizens want to go door to door and sell Rainier bonds, that's what we're going to have to do. We're just going to have to think very creatively of making some money and finding it and making this a reality. It's been long enough.
Thank you, Mr. Alonso. Well, we had a fabulous lead-in, huh?
Conklin.
Conklin.
That's Scott Alonso. We're good.
It was thank you, pause. Mr. Reagan, would you like, Mr. Alonso, thank you. Thank you. So that was a good lead in from Mr. McDonald about the next question. Measure M is a Sonoma County ballot that would institute an 8-cent tax increase in cities, so it's like 3 cents on $25 on cities in unincorporated area, generating an estimated $11.5 million annually for local parks. This should be easy for your 30 seconds. Do you support it, and why?
I do support Measure M. I've been publicly endorsed it. I think it's an important measure to not only for our recreation current backlog to help with maintenance, but we can also acquire more land as well. I mean, look at Lafferty as an example. We can hopefully draw down that money, acquire Lafferty, increase access on the east side of town where I live, give folks more options to get out. And again, if we can pass Measure M, we can strengthen Tole Regional Park as well off of Lakeville, a beautiful park that's going to open up later this fall. And let's give our county and city parks the resources they need. Yes on M.
Ms. Fisher?
Absolutely agree. Yes on M. And our county parks are one of the only parks in the nation that don't have funding. They don't have their own funding source. So this, in fact, would provide that, and I think it's critically important that we do that. We all know how important parks are, particularly in this day and age when we're all in technology and we need to get out and get into the land and on those trails. And it will provide approximately $700,000 a year for Petaluma, and we need that funding. It's critically important moving forward as we have more people coming in to be able to create more green space.
Mr. King?
Yes, I've endorsed Measure M. I think it's important for us to have the funding. We barely have a parks budget as is. We get a lot of our money through grants. That's very difficult to plan, and the $600,000 that will come in under current dollars for Measure M money will be very helpful to replace a lot of the play structures in some of the smaller parks around town. As Kevin mentioned, the trail at Lynch Creek, among other places, we have a lot of needs. And I think I'm hoping that I can get the 2/3 vote to pass.
Thank you. Mr. Posake, you're up.
I also am in favor of Measure M. I'm talking it up with anyone that I speak to about our parks. We can't have too many parks. I love to hike. I love to work on the trails. I need to. I want to have as big an improvement in the maintenance of our parks as we possibly can.
Thank you. Ms. Barrett?
Thank you. Yes, I have officially endorsed Measure M, and I can't think of another source for the city for our parks. Our parks are part of the general fund, of which 75% goes to pay for fire and policemen. We had a conversation here earlier that there's not enough money in that pot for the fire and policemen, so people are very unlikely to want to be diverting that money to parks. This gives us another source of revenue that we can use for our parks, and you've already heard about 10 times as much ways of spending it as the money that's coming in. So we have a lot of needs in our community.
Mr. Powell?
I think we have a lot of issues at hand, and all of them require money. I don't believe that the parks is the most important problem we have at this current time. I don't see us fixing all of them in the next year, 2 or 3. So I'd like to see the major focus go towards public safety, getting the proper police and firemen, and then go from there.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
On Measure M, I have officially endorsed it as well. Obviously, the parks in our community has been one of the areas that's been shortchanged through the austerity policies, and it was very necessary. But now this is an opportunity to backfill those funds, and it's very appropriate for Measure M to move forward. We'll get $600,000 to $700,000 a year to hopefully help with that backlog.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Everybody's well-intended about this and all issues, but it matters is what you do. I went and I spoke at the Board of Supervisors in favor of this. As chair of Petaluma Parks and Rec Commission, I see this as an important issue. But also, I've co-chaired one of the a parks measure for Petaluma in 2012. And the co-chair of the county measure was my partner in that effort back in 2012. I play ball at Lucchese Field on Friday nights. Half the lights are out. We have to do something about park maintenance in this town.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin.
Absolutely, yes on M. Petaluma can't use, we need as many parks as we can as we're doing infill projects. We're losing all the green in our city. I'm on the Petaluma Tree Committee, and I'd like to have nice places to put those trees. So, yes on M.
Mr. Reagan?
Yeah, so absolutely on Measure M. I mean, again, talked about a different mindset is that I have a 6 and a 4-year-old. I go to our parks all the time, and I know how bad a condition they are. And I mean, I just went to Leghorn Park this weekend. One of the slides, or 2 of the slides are broken, and a number of the things are rusted out around the slide area. I mean, it's in pretty bad shape. So we obviously need to get more money into our parks to fix them up so our kids can have a safe place to play. Because right now, if you go to many of our parks, they're not so safe. So absolutely on Measure M.
Thank you so much. All right. The audience now wants to know, you know, this is a 1-year anniversary of the fires. We all sort of think of like the before and the after. How should the city of Petaluma prepare for major disasters such as earthquakes or fire? And we'll start with Ms. Fisher.
Well, we did see an incredible outpouring last year after the fires. Is this a 30-second question?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
No,
all right.
1 minute.
1 minute?
Go for it.
So yeah, the fires last year and the absolute support, the support that everybody stepped up in a time of crises without knowing actually what to do, without any organized plan. It was amazing that everybody found a place to help out and found a place to contribute. And we are providing plans now so that in the future we will know exactly what we are supposed to be doing and not just scrambling, so that our communities will actually have the information they need in the languages that they need to be able to get the resources and the assistance that they need. And so those plans are in place. They're coming into place now through the county. I'm doing that work on the, excuse me, the Sonoma Food System Alliance. I don't remember the question now. It's hard when you go first.
How should we prepare?
So that is how we should prepare. And I think we also need to recognize climate change and the fact that these things are being caused by climate change. And there's a lot more we could do in regard to that, but I'm being told to stop.
Mr. King.
Yes, thank you. We have to prepare for more than just wildfires. Obviously, earthquakes and some other natural disasters can hit Petaluma, and I think this is an area where our city government could do a better job. One area where we're doing well is with our fire department and the outreach that it does for disaster preparedness. Citizens can get their neighborhoods ready for communication. One of the biggest problems in a disaster is communication. So knowing your neighbors, having a group together that can contact each other, take care of the older people in the neighborhood, and work in that direction is something I think that would be that can be done within the community. As for the city, I think what we need to do is revisit our disaster plan. One of the things we can do about fire, we discussed last night at the City Council, is consider a fireworks ban on the sale and use of fireworks within the city. We came a little bit short last night of getting a fireworks ban passed, but I'm in favor of it, and I'm in favor of a phase-in period to allow the nonprofits that rely on it to have a couple of years to get ready to raise their money. But those are a couple things we can do.
Thank you. Mr. Prosser-Kane?
I too was amazed by the efforts the entire city put forth after the fires. I helped out at several shelters and saw people I hadn't seen around town in some time helping out. So this is great. On the other hand, when I attended the supervisor's listening session regarding disaster preparedness at Lucchese, I was concerned to find that a lot of the plans still did not take full account of our Latino community and their efforts and their suggestions in regard to taking care. Certainly at the time of the fires, there were situations where our Latino community did not get full information or get information quickly enough.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett.
Thank you. I also attended that supervisors meeting at Lucchese where people came together in our area to talk about how we responded, what worked, what didn't work. And as the previous speakers have said, how we responded couldn't have been better, but we were the people who were giving help. We weren't the people looking for help. And that may not be the case. Many of us who have been around here for quite a while remember when Payran flooded and people had to get out of their houses in boats and makeshift ways in order to save their families and lost a lot in their own homes. We do need a better plan, and we must coordinate that at least with the county. I think it should be done on a regional basis through AAUW kind of relationship, our 9 counties, because we don't know if it's going to be an earthquake, if it's going to be flooding or inundation or a fire. But we as a city council can, one, get into those relationships and partnerships, and the other thing we can do is be smart about our planning decisions. Where we build matters.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
I believe we should do some research, find out what community in the country has the best emergency plan, and mirror that to match our community. One of my major concerns with disaster is the Westridge area on the west side of town. If a fire comes from out of town, it's going to be worse than Coffee Park. So I think we need to start implementing some plans to keep fire out of our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
Thank you. So we have emergency plans in place. Obviously, we all collectively as a region learned a lot from last year and the fires. Petaluma has had to activate our EOC plans in the past with the flooding that's happened or inclement weather, and the fire department, they're the ones on the front lines, and they activate, and then the rest of the city, they're captains in individual areas. So we've actually activated the plans before. Now, obviously, last year, we were more a refugee area as well for the others. So we've learned a lot through that process. So we can continue to upgrade our plans from everything that we've learned, the things that we've gone through as a city individually in those circumstances over the years. So we should always be upgrading our plans. I know before the city council, every year, there's usually an update of some sort to kind of check in to see where we are. So we've learned a lot over the last year, but of course from what we've dealt with as a city as well.
Thank you so much. Mr. McDonald?
I, too, was at the county supervisors listening session and was underwhelmed by what the county brought here, probably because the focus wasn't as much here. But I commend Dennis and the group who drove that point home about inclusiveness to all members of the community in times of emergency. So that was excellent effort on probably the only big good thing out of that meeting. But Petaluma's fire department is leading in this. They're leading 8 workshops over the next 2 years in conjunction with rebuilding Petaluma. So I mean, we are doing physical things here that are important. Also, I was visiting at the senior center. There's a senior advisory committee. Are we all aware how many committees the city has? And their issue was, what about the COPE program? We rolled out a program a couple years ago. What are we doing to continue that program? There's a lot of things in process. They're all dependent on citizen participation. You have to engage. I have to engage so the city can succeed at its mission. You know, that's one of the key things we see is that programs get instituted, but we need participation.
Thank you. Mr. Conklin?
Lately, the city's been having a lot of disaster preparedness or emergency preparedness workshops. I attended one in Walnut Park with my daughter for her Girl Scout troop. It was very informative. Then, you know, learn a little about what you need to do, and then talk to your family about it, whether it's having emergency kits ready in the house for food or water, and if, you know, you have to evacuate the city because we're surrounded by hills and grass, that which way we're going, and hopefully we have enough routes through town to get out if we need to in an emergency situation. Basically, us as citizens just have to do our part and just be aware of it and have a plan, and then pass the word around. Yes, and I was disappointed that the Spanish-speaking residents were kind of out of the loop in when the fires in Santa Rosa happened. It was not okay in my book. So,
Thank you, Mr. Reagan.
Yeah, no, I think it's obviously critical. We live in an area that can have earthquakes, fires, a lot of flooding. Obviously, my in-laws lost their house in Santa Rosa last year, so I know what they went through. We obviously have to plan for that, and our fire department does a great job with that, having a plan. It also has to be personal responsibility too. People, having that safety kit, being prepared, and we have an amazing community. I mean, Sarah Sass, who's in the audience, did an amazing job after the fires last year of organizing people and putting it together. We have an amazing community that came together, and we just need to use that power, get everyone's ideas, making sure, is there anything that we can do better to have us prepared? Because obviously, the area we live in, it's going to happen. It's just, what is it, and are we prepared enough? So it's, again, personal responsibility, but our fire department does a great job putting a plan together.
Thank you very much. So the next question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll
Mr.
go real
Alonso.
quick, I promise.
You get a full minute.
Thanks. I actually served last year during the fires. I'm a public information officer by training. I'm FEMA certified and certified through the CDC on crisis and emergency risk communications. And what I saw at the fires last year at the county level was really the challenge and the disconnect between what the county was doing and what the city of Petaluma was doing. And things didn't go that well here. We actually had a shadow EOC, an emergency operations center, that had to spring up. Community members had to come together to fill the gaps because the city of Petaluma wasn't prepared. That's a huge problem. I mean, good for those folks for coming up and helping and provide for the shelters, because they helped so many people. But we have to do better. We only invest $5,000 a year in emergency planning for a city this size. That's abysmal. Our EOC is in an old mortuary where the police station is, so we have to invest in our civic infrastructure and public safety infrastructure. Our EOC for a city this size cannot function in an old mortuary. It doesn't work. So we have to get better at planning and training. We have to train our staff. It has to be a priority here in our city government and our culture to make sure that we're prepared for the next disaster.
Thank you. Okay. Last round before finals here. I have to commend the audience. You've been wonderful. Communications. How do you plan to communicate with your constituents, if elected?
Well, the same way I've been doing it for the last 4 years. If someone calls me, I return the call. I respond to most emails. We do get deluged with on certain issues with hundreds of emails. I will be candid. I don't respond to the hundreds of emails, saying yes or no on an issue. I think I'm very accessible as a person and as a council member, and I'm an open-minded person who listens to the entire community before I make a decision, and that's how I would continue.
Thank you. Dr. Posake, half a minute on how you plan to communicate with your constituents if elected.
I also like to think that I listen to all points of view before coming to a decision. And in this regard, I would pledge to have office hours at different spots around town, at least one, and if needed, 2 afternoons a week, mostly on the east side.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett.
Well, I think that I have a reputation in town for being the most approachable and responsive council member that has been on our council, I think, forever. Well, no, I do get that. I've gotten those reviews from groups that review me. They say that I always have that they always hear that from their constituencies. It's something you have to do, but I will say I'm with David King on this one. If you're going to send me a form letter and I'm going to get 30 or 40 of those, I don't think that deserves a personal response. Send your own letter. Tell me how you feel. Thank you.
Mr. Powell?
I'm out and about in the community every day, talking to folks every day of the year. I'm easy to find, and my phone number will be available if I get elected. People can call me, have meetings, whatever folks like to do, as opposed to usually the elected officials are just someone you hear about, see different times. I'd like to bring it together, bring people to be able to come to me and make a difference so I can hear everything that they have to bring to the table. And it's just not me coming up here talking. If I get elected, I bring what the community's talking about with me.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you. So for the 12 years I was on the council, I was known as somebody who was very accessible. Even the people that didn't agree with me always said, well, at least you responded to me, we had a discussion. You didn't vote the way I wanted you to, but at least you got back to me. And I think that was important for me as well, to gain valuable information from different groups to come up with that final decision. I would continue that if I'm honored to be elected, to be accessible. My home number is on my campaign materials, and of course will be on the city's website if I'm honored to win. And I always return phone calls and emails.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
You know, when I was running the soccer league with 3,000 kids, everybody wanted to talk to you. And so you learn quickly, you have to be responsive and effective at doing that. And you have to be able to reach all the people in your group. When I meet with the campaign people, as we're all having house meetings, people say, why doesn't the city do this? Yeah, we should. We should reach out more. All of our issues really come down to money or communication. And so we need to do more communication. I mean, I started a group all about communication in the growth area, so we could do that. The people at the Davidoff development are fighting that came and said, we'll talk to us. The people at Gray Lawn that were fighting the Gray Lawn development said, come engage with us. That's a city council job. That's what they should be responding to.
Mr. Conklin?
Well, I think we need to bring our city's website into the 21st century and maybe get involved with them. I mean, I know we have some social media, but it seems like everybody knows how to use Facebook and, you know, Instagram. And I think, you know, especially the younger generation who want to get involved should be able to just be a click away from their, you know, elected official. If you make a vote on city council, maybe have a paragraph or two explaining why you voted that way and what you were thinking, and it might answer a lot of questions.
Thank you. Mr. Reagan?
Yeah, so just like I run my business, I mean, I'm accessible. I'm around town everywhere. You can call, email. I've already done it through the campaign, Facebook. I mean, I've gotten messages every single way. The other thing I'd like to see implemented is video. That's something that doesn't cost a lot of money, is easy to do, that if the city or individuals, we, as a city council, did a lot more video, they could be posted on social media, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere, and so people could actually access you and see video-wise what's going on. That would be really easily shared. So I'd love to see the city invest in video, and it's really not that expensive. If you have an iPhone, you're good to go. So I'd like to see that.
Mr. Alonso?
Yeah, we need a culture change here at City Hall and how we communicate with the public. We have to be out in the community, meeting with folks. We need to have our public meetings in other places besides this building. I think you've all maybe seen for the first time. There's no AC here. Not a great place, not a very welcoming place to have a public meeting. So let's meet on the east side. Let's meet in central Petaluma. We can be creative. Let's also have meetings that aren't just Monday nights. I pledge to hold regular town hall meetings and office hours myself all over town, because you need to hear directly from me, and I need to hear directly from you about what's happening in your neighborhood.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Well, the one thing I have learned from the public art process, the recent one, is that we need to do a better job as a city in communicating with our constituency. So again, upgrading our website, increasing our communications, and differing our communications. Obviously, we're not being very effective. And I, as a council member, want to start holding town hall meetings. We need to talk together about our budget, about our homeless problem, and the other issues facing us. And we should do this in community together, where we are discussing the issues in not just 30-second snippets.
Yes, understood. But you're doing an elegant job, all of you. So this is your chance to take another minute to wrap up. Touch on things that you forgot to mention before, or mention again why it is that you would be the person that we all want to put a check by when we vote. We're going to start on this end and work back.
Time.
As this campaign has gone on, it seems to me, and I'm sure it seems to some others of you as well, that the platforms of the various candidates are coming closer and closer to similar and even identicality. if that's a proper word. Because of this, I think that it's important for you to think about how else you might decide who to vote for. And I'd like to propose that since we don't know what's going to come to a vote next month, next year, the year after. I mean, we have some ideas about some chronic issues we have, but we're not sure what's going to come to a vote. You want someone who shares the most of your values. And I'd like you to know that my values are honesty, fairness, equity, and transparency, and I promise to bring those to every decision.
Thank you. Mr. King?
Oh, we're going reverse now?
Oh, yes. Just we thought we'd mix it up.
Wow. Tricky.
Thanks for
Right.
rolling with that. Yeah. And we have to keep the audience awake, right?
I was going to take a quick nap. I know. All right. So what I find interesting about campaigning and forums like this is we hear about all of what's wrong and needs to be fixed in a city. I'd like to remind everybody that Petaluma is probably one of the most desirable places to live in California and possibly the United States. It's a great city with people who are active and involved. In my 4 years on the council, what I've attempted to do was what I promised. Try to get more money into our roads that need repair, try to fix our infrastructure, work on expanding and improving our parks, which we've done a mildly good job of, particularly in community sports field. But I agree with Dennis in what he said. You don't know what the issues are that are going to come up. I often remind people the biggest issue in the Bush-Gore election was what to do with Social Security. 9 months later, the Twin Towers were down, and no one cared about the surplus or Social Security. You should elect people who know your community well, listen to all its constituents and citizens, and make informed decisions and have good judgment. And I think I've got that, and I think I've proven it by my 4 years on the council.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher? A minute.
A minute, okay.
Consider it your closing remarks.
Thank you. Well, again, then, thank you all for being here this evening, if these are my closing remarks. I moved here 5 years ago because I was charmed by this community. It's urban growth boundaries. It's historic downtown. I love it here. I'm so glad I moved here. And I decided to run for this position because I know I have the skills and the knowledge and the experience to serve this community in a way that will be very effective. I'd like to talk about my endorsements for a moment. I have the endorsement of Teresa Barrett. I'm very honored about that. And the Democratic Party. Most importantly, please vote. Tell your colleagues, your friends, your family. This is one of the most important rights that we have and one of the most important things that we can do. So please exercise your vote. Thank you.
Mr. Alonso?
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited to participate with my colleagues here on the dais. I'm the youngest candidate in this race. I'm 32. I feel like I'd bring a new perspective and energy to the council if I'm fortunate to be elected. I'm a renter. I live on the east side, and I'm a commuter. So I feel like I understand what's going through working families and working folks every day and what they're facing. I have a track record on the Planning Commission that I'm proud of and serving our community in different ways, from helping raise money for our library system to hitting the ground running, talking to you every day about the issues that matter most and how we can work together. But again, email me, scott@alonsoforpetaluma.com. My website is alonsoforpetaluma.com. Check it out. Email me. Let's grab coffee. Let's grab lunch. And I look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan.
Yeah, so again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. You know, I bring a different perspective because I am the second youngest running on here, but I have a family. I have a 6 and a 4-year-old. I've been involved in this community. I've lived here since the early 90s, went to Petaluma Junior High and Petaluma High School. So I really know, went to the JC even too. Have a business in town, so obviously understand the business aspect. My kids are involved, but I've started the Young Professionals Network under the Chamber. I was a board member of the Petaluma Host Lions Club. I was also the president, and I'm still a board member of the Petaluma Educational Foundation. And I was also the chair of the Transit Advisory Committee for the 1 year Dave, Mr. Alden was not there. So I was the chair on the Transit Advisory Committee. So I have a really broad, even though I'm young, I have a very broad understanding of this city. I know what it takes to move things forward. And I do have a good understanding of different aspects of this city and bring a different viewpoint. And again, with housing being one of our biggest issues, wouldn't it make sense to have someone who actually knows housing on the council? So I would just put that out there when you do get ready to vote. So thank you.
Mr. Conklin?
Well, I'm the third youngest candidate. Just turned 40. I just like to bring a perspective of the common working man of Petaluma. I'd like to represent the people just scraping by, the ones that are one missed paycheck away from losing their home. There's been times that are tight when I bought a house at 26, raised a family during the recession, and we're rubbing 2 nickels together to try to buy dinner. I would just like to bring that perspective, and the way I look at it, the Petaluma politics now is 2 sides. It's business and stop business, and I'd like to bring both sides together and take care of the 80% in the middle, which I feel are very underrepresented right now.
Mr. McDonald?
Hi, I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm the 4th youngest on the. Really, my bona fides here that I use an app. The city of Petaluma has an app to report things. We forget sometimes to say, hey, the city's doing good stuff. One of the things was mentioned earlier, recycle water. Another one's the city's app. But for 33 years, I've been in town participating and joining and then turning out to lead different organizations. And whether it was youth soccer or whether it's our Know Before You Grow citizens forum about development, which I all hope you come to attend our affordable housing forum next week. So that's just a little commercial plug here for Dave and the gang who worked so hard pulling that together. But I've actually had experience doing things that matter when you have to stand up. Like when leading the soccer league and the English coaches said, the lads will all be there to train your summer camp. And I said, no, it's not lads. We need a woman in here. Or when the Parks Commission said we had so many helpers this summer, I said, how many spoke Spanish? And they didn't know. We need to have metrics like this to make our city a better place. Vote for Kevin.
Thank you. Now we're down to the 3 candidates for our mayor. Mr. Harris.
Thank you. Well, when I was originally elected to the council, I was the youngest back then, but it was many years ago. So thank you very much for having this opportunity tonight. I've been battling the remnants of the flu. That's why I'm hoarse. But thank you to the AAUW and the Petaluma Argus-Courier and the League of Women Voters for having this opportunity to discuss the issues facing our community. So I deeply appreciate that. I was honored to serve on the Petaluma City Council for 12 years. I've served on many nonprofit boards since then. I'm an executive for a local financial services company. I've worked there for 26 years, so I'm very fortunate to live here in town, work in town, and I'd be honored to serve as your mayor here in town as well. I've been honored to be endorsed by the Supervisor David Rabbit, State Senator Bill Dodd, our Peace Officers Association, and the Petaluma Fire Association, along with Sheriff Rob Giordano and our Sheriff-elect Mark Essick. And so for more information about myself, please go to my website at harrisforpetaluma.com, and I would be honored with your support. Thank you.
Mr. Powell.
So, I love Petaluma and I love people. I'm seriously concerned about the direction that our community's been going over the last few years. Things aren't going well for people's health. I'd like to see change, and doing the same things that we've been doing over and over again isn't getting us there. I'd like to continue to learn about what's going on so I can help make this place a better community.
Thank you. Ms. Barrett?
Thank you. I'm not the youngest one on this who's running, and I'm not the youngest one running for mayor. But I do think that I have the judgment, I think I have the temperament, and I think I have the preparation that makes me the most prepared person to be your mayor. When I decided to run for mayor, I almost felt like I was being drafted, because there was an attempt in this city to take the direct election of the mayor away from the voters and give it to the council. And that was not well received. And I came home from a vacation to jammed emails, lots and lots of voicemail, and a couple checks, which said, please run for office. And I decided that I have the preparation to do that. I have the commitment to do that, and I want to do that. So I hope you will let me be your voice and the voice of reason for the city of Petaluma as your mayor. Thank you.
Oh, you're doing well. Okay, clap now. Okay, we'll let you clap again in just a minute. So a little bit of wrap up. We talked a little bit about the importance of voting. We do have some voter registration forms out at the sponsored table, and so there's probably a good chance that people in this room are already registered to vote, but just in case, and if you know somebody, a next door neighbor, a child who is at least 16, can't vote until 18, but they can register. It's like a pre-registration. So pick those up. Also, too, you perhaps notice that there's a table in the hinterland, and that's for campaign materials. So go out and check and see if there's anything there that you'd like to take home with you. We want to give a thank you again to our timekeepers who've done a stellar job, and that would be Sheila and Dee over here in the front. Thank you, ladies. Yes. Thank you to the indulgence of all the, like the middle section there. I just couldn't quite get the order together. You all have been very tolerant. So for over 50 years, AAUW, the American Association of University Women, has hosted forums like this and debates, often with our very favorite partners, the League of Women Voters of Sonoma County and the Petaluma Argus-Courier. We encourage everybody to stay informed and be an educated electorate. As we said at the forum earlier, we can guess the fact that you're here. You already agree with that philosophy, and anybody who's watching at home, thank you for that. We have to apologize. When we set up this forum back in March, there was no way of knowing that we were going to be so blessed with this many candidates. And so I apologize that this is just a snapshot, a chance, a taste, as I said earlier. So if you have questions, these people are accessible. Send them emails, call them, look at their Facebook pages, and we'd like to make sure that you have an additional resource that would be Smart Voter, all one word, smartvoter.org. That's the League's webpage. So if you have questions about some of the issues that are statewide, in addition to local that apply to the whole county, those are there. So this is the time to give these candidates one more round of applause for coming. And on behalf of the sponsors at AAUW, the League of Women Voters, and the Argus-Courier, we wish you well, and we wish that you vote on November 6th. I got criticized for saying vote early, vote often. I just never meant in the same election. Good night.
There we go.
No, don't worry. Yeah, I'll leave it to the staff to be and everything else. We're going to do it? There we go. Okay. Yourself.